I never thought I'd end up as a live-in caregiver for a woman I'd never met, but when you're 24 years old with no degree, drowning in debt, and desperate enough to take any job that offers room and board, you don't ask too many questions. The agency said Mrs. Helena Winters needed help managing her estate and personal care. The pay was modest, but it included housing in her guest cottage, meals, and honestly, I had nowhere else to go. My stepfamily had made it abundantly clear I wasn't welcome anymore, and my options were this job or my car. So I took it. Mrs. Winters lived in this massive old house on the edge of town, the kind of place that had probably been beautiful once but now felt heavy with neglect and sadness. She was 87 years old, widowed for a decade, with grown children who apparently couldn't be bothered to visit or help. The agency warned me she was difficult and particular, which I'd learned was code for nobody else wants this job. They'd gone through 5 caregivers in the past year alone. When I met Mrs. Winters that first day, I understood why people quit. She was sharp-tongued, critical, and seemed to take pleasure in pointing out everything I did wrong. The way I made her tea was wrong. The way I folded her newspapers was wrong. The way I arranged her pillows was wrong. Nothing I did met her exacting standards, and she let me know it constantly. But here's the thing. I'd grown up with a stepmother who made Mrs. Winters look warm and fuzzy by comparison. I'd spent my teenage years being told I was worthless, lazy, stupid, that I'd never amount to anything. My stepsister, perfect golden child that she was, got all the praise and opportunities while I got criticism and extra chores. So Mrs. Winters's sharp comments rolled off me like water off a duck. I'd heard worse, and from people who were supposed to love me. I just did my job. Every morning, I'd help Mrs. Winters with her routine, helping her dress, making her breakfast exactly how she liked it, organizing her medications, reading her the newspaper. I'd maintain the house, dusting, vacuums, laundry, cooking. I'd tend the overgrown garden that had once been her pride and joy. I didn't complain, didn't talk back, didn't quit when she was harsh. I just worked. The estate was overwhelming at first. Decades of accumulated possessions, rooms that hadn't been properly cleaned in years, a garden choking on weeds. But I'm not afraid of hard work, it's literally all I'd ever known. So I tackled it methodically. One room at a time. One section of garden at a time. When Mrs. Winters would criticize how I'd organized something, I'd redo it her way without argument. When she'd complain that I'd missed a spot cleaning, I'd go back and clean it again. About 3 weeks in, something shifted. I was in the garden, pulling weeds in the brutal afternoon heat, when Mrs. Winters came out onto the porch with her walker. She just stood there watching me for a long time. Finally, she said, "You're still here?" I looked up, confused. "Yes, ma'am. Where else would I be?" The last 5 girls quit within 2 weeks. Said I was impossible to work for. There was something in her voice, not quite apology, but maybe the beginning of respect. "You're not impossible," I said honestly. "You just have high standards. Nothing wrong with that." She studied me for another moment, then said something that surprised me. "You remind me of myself at your age. Before everything changed." Over the following weeks, Mrs. Winters started talking to me. Really talking, not just criticizing. She told me about her life, how she'd come from nothing, worked her way up as a secretary, married a man who built a successful business, raised 3 children, created this beautiful home and garden. And then how everything had slowly fallen apart after her husband died. Her children, busy with their own lives, had stopped visiting. Her health had declined. The house had become too much to manage alone. She'd become bitter, angry at the world, at her children, at herself for getting old and dependent. "I test people," she admitted one evening as I was helping her prepare for bed. "I'm harsh because I expect everyone to leave anyway. If they're going to go, I'd rather they go quickly before I start to care." "What if they don't leave?" I asked. She looked at me with these sharp, intelligent eyes. "Then maybe they're worth keeping around." I'd been there about 2 months when Mrs. Winters's daughter called, the first time any of her children had contacted her in weeks. There was some family event, and they needed Mrs. Winters to access some family heirlooms from the attic. The daughter couldn't come herself, of course, but maybe the help could find the items and ship them? Mrs. Winters asked me to go up to the attic and look for a specific set of silver. The attic was dusty and overwhelming, filled with decades of memories. As I was searching, I found something else. A beautiful antique spinning wheel, covered in dust but clearly valuable. I also found boxes of old photographs, letters, mementos from Mrs. Winters's life. I could have just grabbed the silver and left. But something made me spend the next several hours carefully going through that attic, organizing things, setting aside items I thought Mrs. Winters might want to see, cleaning decades of dust-off forgotten treasures. When I finally brought down the silver, along with the spinning wheel and several boxes of photographs, it was past midnight. Mrs. Winters was still awake, worried I'd gotten hurt in the attic. When she saw what I'd brought down, she started crying. "My spinning wheel," she whispered. "I thought it was gone. And these photographs? I haven't seen these in 20 years. We stayed up until 3 in the morning looking through those boxes. She told me stories about every photograph. Her wedding day, her children as babies, vacations, holidays, the life she'd built. And she kept touching that spinning wheel like it was the most precious thing in the world. "My grandmother taught me to spin on this wheel," she said. "I was going to teach my daughter, but she was never interested. I put it in the attic thinking someday maybe a granddaughter, but they never visit." The next day, something was different. Mrs. Winters was softer somehow, and she started teaching me things. Not criticism, actual teaching. She showed me how to properly set a formal table, how to arrange flowers, how to manage a household budget, how to write a proper business letter. Skills her own children had never wanted to learn. One morning, about 4 months into my job, Mrs. Winters called me into her study. "Sit down," she said. "We need to talk about your future." I sat, nervous. Was she firing me? Had I finally done something unforgivable? "You're wasting yourself here," she said bluntly. "You're smart, hardworking, reliable. Why aren't you in school? Why aren't you building a career?" I felt my throat tighten. "Can't afford it. I have debt from a semester I had to drop out of. No family support. This job barely covers my expenses as it is." She was quiet for a moment, then opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "I'm old and I'm not stupid. I know my children are waiting for me to die so they can inherit. They call me maybe once a month out of obligation, never visit, and couldn't care less about my well-being. You, a stranger, have shown me more genuine care in 4 months than they have in 10 years. She pushed the folder toward me. "I'm paying off your student debt. All of it. And I'm enrolling you in online classes so you can get your degree while continuing to work here. You'll study business management because that's practical and will serve you well." I stared at her, unable to speak. "Don't argue with me," she said sharply. "I'm not being charitable. This is an investment. You take care of me, I take care of you. That's how it should work." Over the next 2 years, my life transformed. I continued working for Mrs. Winters, but now I was also taking classes online, learning business management, accounting, operations. Mrs. Winters became not just my employer but my mentor. She'd been a brilliant businesswoman in her day, and she taught me everything she knew. She introduced me to her financial advisor, her attorney, her network of contacts. She brought me to charity board meetings where she still served, teaching me about nonprofit management and high-level networking. She critiqued my papers for school with the same exacting standards she applied to everything, making me better. But it wasn't one-sided. I continued caring for her as her health slowly declined. I managed her medical appointments, her medications, her physical therapy. I renovated the garden back to its former glory because it brought her joy to see it beautiful again. I organized the house, preserving and protecting all those memories her children didn't care about. When Mrs. Winters had a serious health scare and was hospitalized, her children finally showed up. They were polite to me but clearly viewed me as just the hired help. They made decisions about their mother's care without consulting me, even though I was the one who'd been managing her health for 2 years. Mrs. Winters, sharp as ever even from her hospital bed, noticed. When her children left, she told me, "They came because they think I'm dying and they want to make sure they're in the will. You came because you actually care if I live." She recovered from that scare, and when she came home, she made changes. She updated her will, though she didn't tell me what changes she'd made. She also made me her healthcare proxy and power of attorney, which infuriated her children. They tried to convince her I was manipulating her, taking advantage of an elderly woman. Mrs. Winters shut that down fast. "This girl has been more of a daughter to me than any of you," she told them coldly. "She knows my wishes, respects my autonomy, and actually cares about my quality of life, not just my bank account. If you'd visited more than twice a year, maybe I'd trust you with these decisions. But you didn't, so I don't." I graduated with my business degree 2.5 years after starting to work for Mrs. Winters. She threw me a graduation party, invited all her high society friends, and introduced me as my protégé rather than her caregiver. She gave me a gift that day, a beautiful leather portfolio with my name embossed on it. Inside was a letter of recommendation so glowing it could have gotten me a job anywhere, along with a check for $50,000. "Startup capital," she said when I tried to refuse. "I expect you to build something with it. And I expect regular reports on your progress." But I didn't leave. Mrs. Winters was 89 now, increasingly frail, and I couldn't abandon her. Besides, she'd become the family I'd never had. So I stayed, continuing to care for her while using my evenings to start a small business consulting company, helping other elderly people manage their estates and finances. Mrs. Winters's health continued to decline over the next year. Her children visited slightly more often, but it was clear they were circling, waiting. They'd ask me intrusive questions about her finances, her will, what she'd said about her estate distribution. I told them nothing, it wasn't my business to share. One evening, about 3.5 years after I'd first arrived, Mrs. Winters called me to her bedside. She knew the end was near, we both did. She took my hand with her frail fingers. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I've rewritten my will. My children will receive their inheritances, of course. I'm not cruel. But the house, the estate, and a significant portion of my assets are going to you." I started to protest, but she squeezed my hand. "Listen to me. You earned this. Not through manipulation or scheming, but through genuine care and hard work. You saw me as a person, not an obligation or an ATM. You took what I offered to teach and actually learned. You honored my memories when everyone else forgot them. Your children," I began. "My children will be fine. They have careers, families, resources. They don't need this house or my money, they just want it. You, on the other hand, started with nothing and built yourself up through sheer determination. You're what I was at your age, before marriage and children. You're the legacy I want to leave." She passed away 2 weeks later, peacefully, with me holding her hand. I'd cared for her until the very end, managing her pain, reading to her, making sure she was comfortable and never alone. The funeral was well attended. Her children played the part of grieving offspring, though I noticed they seemed more interested in talking to the estate lawyer than mourning their mother. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. I expected maybe a small bequest, maybe enough to cover a few months of expenses while I built my business. I never expected what actually happened. Mrs. Winters had left her children each a substantial cash inheritance, several $100,000 each. They were already looking smug, calculating their windfalls. Then the lawyer got to the real estate holdings. The house, estate grounds, and all associated property, valued at approximately $3.2 million, I leave to Emma Richardson, who has been more of a daughter to me than anyone else in the final years of my life. The room exploded. Her children were furious, shouting about manipulation, undue influence, taking advantage of an elderly woman. The lawyer calmly pulled out documentation, letters Mrs. Winters had written explaining her reasoning, statements from her doctors confirming her mental competency, a video recording she'd made explaining her decision. In the video, Mrs. Winters looked directly at the camera and said, "If my children are watching this and feeling angry, I want them to ask themselves this. When was the last time you visited me just to visit, not because you wanted something? When was the last time you called just to talk, not to check if I was still alive so you could plan your inheritance? Emma showed me more love in 3 years than you showed me in the last 20. She earned this. You didn't." There were other provisions too. The spinning wheel went to me, along with all the photographs and family mementos her children had never cared about. There was also a trust fund, another $1 million, designated specifically for me to use to expand my business helping elderly people. Emma has a gift for caring for seniors with dignity and competence, Mrs. Winters had written. This trust will allow her to build a business that provides the kind of care I received to others who need it. This is my legacy, not wealth sitting in a bank account, but active good being done in the world. The children challenged the will, of course. They hired lawyers, made accusations, tried to prove their mother had been mentally incompetent or that I'd manipulated her. But Mrs. Winters had been too thorough. Every document was in order, every decision documented, every claim they made easily disproven. The will stood. And suddenly, I went from a broke young woman with nothing to someone with significant assets and opportunities. I could have just sold everything and lived comfortably on the money. But that would have dishonored Mrs. Winters's intent and everything she taught me. Instead, I kept the house and converted part of it into the headquarters for Winters Care Management, a company dedicated to providing dignified, competent care for elderly people, especially those whose own families had abandoned them. I hired caregivers and trained them not just in practical skills but in seeing their clients as whole people with rich histories and valuable knowledge to share. I paid them well, gave them benefits, treated them as professionals. The trust fund allowed me to subsidize care for people who couldn't afford quality help. Within 2 years, Winters Care Management was serving 43 clients across 3 states. Within 5 years, we had 200 employees and were operating in 8 states. The business Mrs. Winters had given me seed money for had grown into something that honored her memory every single day. I still live in her house, our house now. I've preserved her garden, kept her photographs and mementos, maintained the beautiful space she created. And I've added to it, updating systems, making it more accessible, but keeping the soul of the place intact. Sometimes I think about my stepfamily. Last I heard, my stepsister, the golden child who got everything handed to her, is doing fine. She married well, has a comfortable suburban life. She never had to work as hard as I did, never had to claw her way up from nothing. But I don't envy her anymore. Because while she was being handed things, I was earning them. While she was learning to expect the world to accommodate her, I was learning to create value and solve problems. While she was being praised for existing, I was building actual skills and character. Mrs. Winters used to say, "The world doesn't owe you anything, but it will reward you for genuine effort and character." She was right. My stepfamily threw me away like I was worthless, and in doing so, they pushed me toward the life I was meant to have. If I'd stayed in that house, being treated like a servant by my stepmother, constantly compared to my stepsister, I might have internalized that I really was less than. Instead, I learned I was capable of incredible things. I learned that hard work, genuine care, and integrity are rewarded, maybe not immediately, but eventually. The irony isn't lost on me. My stepfamily treated me like cheap labor, like my only value was in what work I could do for them. And then I found Mrs. Winters, who initially also needed someone to work for her. But the difference was that Mrs. Winters saw my work as valuable, saw me as someone worth investing in, treated me like family in a way my actual family never did. I'm 30 years old now. I run a multi-million-dollar company that provides dignified care to hundreds of elderly people. I live in a beautiful house filled with memories and meaning. I have a career I'm proud of, doing work that matters. And I have the knowledge that I earned every bit of it through my own effort and character. Sometimes I walk through the garden I restored from overgrowth that Mrs. Winters loved so much, and I think about the journey. From a young woman sleeping in her car, desperate enough to take any job, to this. From someone told she was worthless to someone who built something valuable. The moral isn't that hard work is always rewarded or that kind rich people are waiting to save you. The moral is that how you do anything is how you do everything. I could have done the minimum at that job, could have quit when Mrs. Winters was harsh, could have been bitter about cleaning someone else's house. Instead, I brought my full effort to every task, treated even criticism as information to improve, and showed genuine care because that's who I wanted to be as a person. Mrs. Winters didn't save me. She gave me opportunities, yes, and resources I desperately needed. But I saved myself through the choice to be excellent, to care genuinely, to work with integrity even when no one was watching or appreciating it. The woman who finds her worth isn't the one who waits for others to see her value. It's the one who demonstrates her value through her actions, who shows up fully even in difficult circumstances, who treats every task, no matter how humble, as worth doing well. That woman will eventually find people who recognize and reward what she offers. I found my worth not when Mrs. Winters left me her estate, but every day I chose to do excellent work regardless of recognition. The inheritance just proved what I'd already discovered. I was valuable, capable, and worthy. And no amount of neglect from my stepfamily or initial harshness from Mrs. Winters could change that truth. That's the real story. Not rags to riches, but the journey of a woman learning her own worth, demonstrating it consistently, and eventually having the world recognize what she'd known all along. She was worth infinitely more than anyone had given her credit for.